Don't you click that remote. Don't you change anything, because if you do, if you leave the table that you're watching it from, leave your chair, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show, because our guest this evening is Myles Mendoza. He's from EdChoice, Illinois. He's the executive director there. He's a Democrat. He's a Democrat for educational choice. He's also a Democrat for Bruce Rauner, okay, who, if you haven't heard, is the Republican nominee for governor in the state of Illinois. Oh no, you're going to learn so much about education. You're going to learn so much about what's wrong with education and how to fix it. You're going to learn how to save. There are 400,000 kids in the Chicago public schools. My guess, at least 200,000 of them, maybe more, need saving. And this guy, the guy sitting to my right, not necessarily my philosophical right, but Myles Mendoza is going to tell you something about saving those kids. So don't click that remote. Don't move away, because if you do, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show. In public affairs, as I promised, our guest this evening is Myles Mendoza, and you're going to know everything, learn everything about school choice, what it is. But you know, often I talk too much, so I'm going to stop right here and ask our guest, Myles Mendoza, what's wrong with the Chicago public schools?
Yeah, I think at this point what we have is we have a system where there's lots of advocacy happening for the adults who work in the system, but there's not a lot of advocates supporting the position of children. Children don't have enough power. And one of the goals of my organization, EdChoice Illinois, is to put the fiscal power in the control of children and their parents as proxies to make decisions for them.
So you want to empower parents. Children are in the center, but you want to empower the parents to make choices about their education. Would that be? And is that, right now, is that what's wrong with the Chicago public schools? Parents have virtually no choice about how to educate their kids or where to educate them. If they're in the city of Chicago, if they're almost anywhere, we have, let me just take 30 seconds. Across the country, we have public schools in the main educating our kids, and they educate probably 90, maybe 95% of the kids, and they are all pretty much local monopolies. If you want to change your school, but sure, you can just move, right? Because most of it's based on where you live as to where your kids go to school. But a lot of people can't move easily, and therefore, or you can send your kid to a private school, but then you pay twice for your property taxes.
If you have the financial capacity.
If you have the financial wherewithal.
But if you don't have financial capacity, you don't have choice. But choice is not the only silver bullet, and it's not a silver bullet. If you don't combine choice next to other policies, you cannot reform the system.
See, I would think it is a silver bullet. Why isn't it a silver bullet choice?
You know, my perspective is based upon quality seats. So if we look at 400,000 seats within Chicago Public Schools, we know a great majority of those seats are not performing where they need to. Some charter schools are succeeding and they're providing a great quality education. Others are failing and we need to close them. But there's no other single sector that you can look toward to find a high number of quality seats that you can access tomorrow. If we're going to build new charter schools, it's going to take time. Private schools are available tomorrow.
When you say there's no other sector where you can look to fill it, what do you mean by another sector?
Well, if we look at the traditional sector and we say we want to grow quality seats, we need to reform it. We need to provide incentive-based pay. We need to provide accountability through testing. All of these things are going to take generations. They're going to take a lot of time. But we have thousands of quality seats available in the private sector tomorrow. With the flip of the switch, tomorrow, kids can access those seats.
We've discussed this show from time to time, discussed this on this show, Choice, and people say to me, if I were proposing this, they say, well, you know, Jeff, where are these kids going to go? Because there are some private schools out there, but they would say they don't have the capacity at this point to accept the kids.
And that's not true.
So
there's absolute capacity.
Hypothetically, we have just we're focusing on Chicago. I know
Sure.
you're broader, and
We are Illinois.
you're in Illinois, but if we focus on Chicago for a minute, Chicago has 400,000 kids, approximately, I believe, in the public schools.
Correct.
About 50,000 or so are in charter schools, and the others are in either traditional neighborhood schools or magnet schools, or what we call select enrollment schools, which are magnet schools, and that's about it. So 400,000 kids. Now, if we gave everybody choice,
And there's 2,500 kids that are already on publicly funded private dollars going to publicly funded dollars to go to private school. They're only the special education students that are being taken care of by the private sector.
well, some of the special education students are being
Right.
taken because they have the choice to opt out, is that right? Or is that the only place they can go to get their needs filled as
Correct.
kids who require special ed? Because it's a little confusing, it's a slight digression. Everybody thinks there's inclusion, and inclusion I thought meant that special ed kids or kids with special needs, whether they were learning disabilities, educational disabilities, whatever, they were entitled to attend schools with other kids and they would be included, and that would be a public school. Now you're telling me special ed kids have options to go to private schools that other kids don't?
There's the only students that are outsourced to the private sector are those with special needs, and that's
But it's not
roughly
all-
2,500 students.
Okay, but it's not all kids with special needs. It's
Not at all,
These would
by
be
no means,
would
no.
these tend to be the kids with the greatest or most extreme special needs?
Definitely the
Okay.
more exceptional end of the spectrum.
All right, so 2,500 kids leave the CPS for those reasons. Everybody else, unless they can go to a private school, they're in one of the CPS public schools.
Correct.
And they're either in a charter school, which is a public school. And it's, as you said, 10 or 12%. They're in select enrollment schools. I don't know what percentage that is. Do you know?
I don't.
Okay, small, relatively small. And most of the kids are in what we call traditional neighborhood schools, right? Okay. And if we gave everybody a choice, all 400,000 students, whether they were in a charter school, whether they're in a traditional neighborhood school, including the kids with special needs, all 400,000 students. And we said, because on average we're spending now, by my calculation, $15,000 per kid per year in the CPS. And folks, the easy math there, the budget had been about $6 billion. It crept down over the last few years, maybe to $5.3 billion. It might be creeping back up. If it's not $6 billion, it's pretty close. 400,000 students into $6 billion, $15,000 per kid per year. Now they will fudge and say, well, that includes capital costs. Well, look, when you buy an automobile, there are capital costs to producing that car. And if you buy a car that costs you $40,000, it reflects all the costs, capital and operating. Should our schools be any different? It's a rhetorical question. But the main thing is, I'm sorry this took a little long to get there, but if we gave everybody the $15,000 and said, you can go to the school of your choice, and if they stay in the private school, in the public school, and we gave a parent $15,000, and I don't have with me for once, this could be the last cable show, explain that to you, last picture show. And I usually have a backpack here, because if you throw the $15,000 per family that has one kid, per kid, into the backpack, if they had 2 kids, they get $30,000. They strap on the backpack, and if the parents and the kid decide to go to a private school, out goes the kid, out goes the backpack, out goes the cash. The money follows the kid, so to speak, not the school, not the system, the kid.
Right now,
And I just want to ask you one
Yep.
question, and then stop this monologue. So, if 200,000 kids opted out and their families, their parents said, we want to leave the public school and go to the private school of their choice, are you telling me there would be 200,000 seats out there to accept them tomorrow?
No. The first thing to understand is in that backpack currently, if we were looking at kids and we put $15,000 in every student's backpack, we would first take out about $9,000. Okay, so you only have 60%.
Wait a second, why would we take out 9,000?
60% of the dollars that are being spent on a per pupil revenue are going towards administrative costs. They're not actually going towards the students.
No, we don't take it out, because the alternative to that, where these kids go, could very well be a school that's private that has administrative costs. So there's no reason to take that out and say it's administrative. There's no reason to take out anything. It costs on average, look, we were just talking with Trey, one of your young assistants who works with youth, right? It's a real school. We don't mess around. We don't deceive people. So Trey is attending DePaul, right?
Trey is a 17-year-old junior at DePaul studying economics and political science.
Right.
And the recipient of scholarships that allowed him to go to a private school to actualize his talent. He is the symbol of many other students we know have that same capacity.
Wow. So where did he
go? But
go?
It's not unlocked because they don't have the academic conditions to allow that.
How did he get that opportunity to go to that private school? Since we know in Chicago, we don't, unfortunately, usually. Mr. Mayor Rahm Emanuel, he opposes school vouchers, favors charter schools. He favors letting his own kids go to the private school of their choice, which happens to be a lab school. I don't criticize the mayor for that, like some people in the media did. He sends his kid to the school that he and his wife think is best, or his kids. There's nothing wrong with it. The hypocritical thing is he doesn't want to give Trey or any other kid, family, the ability to take their money and go to the school of their choice. They say, oh, if you happen to have the money, Rahm would say you could. Now, how do I know this? Because Rahm sat in the very chair you're sitting in, on this very set. Well, it was actually in Winnetka, but furniture was the same. In 2002, when he was running for Congress, he said, I'm for charter schools, but I'm not for school vouchers.
You know, there's nothing
so
better.
he's like for certain kinds of choice, and you'll get into that in a second.
Nothing changes a mayor or any elected official better than actually being in the decision maker's position and watching what happens. I think the perspective from far away.
You think he's changing?
You know, I think there's great hope for change. Okay. Sometimes there's no better asset than strong opposition.
Okay. But the point, I got digression, but so Trey and I were speaking as with you during the show, before the show, talking about economics. If he's studying economics, he would know there's like a total cost of production. There's an average total cost. In a sense, the average total cost of production of a child's education in Chicago is about $15,000 per kid per year. If we're going to give somebody else a chance to compete, give them the whole thing, $15,000. I don't care whether it's administrative cost. I don't care whether somebody was graft. I don't care what it was.
It's a great fantasy, but it's never going to happen in reality.
Why isn't it? It's called a fully funded school voucher.
Right.
Whatever it is. Why isn't it going to happen?
It's a great idea.
Why isn't it going to happen?
I would love for every child to have $15,000. There's too much liability happening in the state right now. Where
too much liability.
I think the idea of the only way I think a deal could be struck is by allowing some of those funds to pay down some of the debt that is already existing within the Chicago public school system deficit.
I don't know, because no debt is forever, and so as you have fewer kids to educate, you can get rid of that debt. Now maybe you'd phase it down. Maybe you'd say 80%, but I wouldn't, if I were you, give up that before you negotiate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be a great asset to give to kids.
Okay.
It's their money.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
but get
there
back
are
to my
realities.
question. Well, these 200,000 kids, hypothetically, I said would leave. You said there's a seat. Where are the seats? Because private schools currently fill about 10% of the demand. There probably are 40,000 or so private seats, most of whom are parochial schools, but not all, right? In Chicago, how many private seats are there that are being filled? Kids are sitting in there, they're attending private schools.
There's 200,000 total seats in the state of Illinois.
200,000 private seats in the state.
Private seats total.
But there are about 2 million students, aren't there? So that's about 10%.
In the city of Chicago, there's roughly, let's just
10% of 2 million, right?
Let's say there's about 80,000 private school seats. Now the question is,
that would be 20%. That would be 20%, which is higher than you just gave me a 10% average across the state of Illinois. Now it could be, because if you said 200,000 across the state of Illinois, and I think we have roughly 2 million students, doing my math right, that's 10%. Now you're telling me in Chicago it's 80,000 of 400,000, that's 20%. Are you right?
Let me tell you, Jeff, the less important stat is how many seats, it's how many quality seats. I don't want to have every seat be open to every student. Why should a student leave a failing school to go to a worse private school? Private schools aren't all perfect, but if there's quality seats, opening up those quality seats,
and there will be quality seats.
Will absolutely improve academic performance.
You know why there will be quality seats? Because right now, if somebody wants to leave, they can't take anything. They can't take anything. They go to the parochial school. The parochial school, in most cases, has to fund it, because the parent earns something like 20 or 30,000, or the family does. They can't fork over 5 or 10,000 if the tuition is even low, which is 5,000. So my point is, the purchasing power isn't there. But even if you did it your way, like give them half of the 15,000, say 7,500, that's a tremendous amount of purchasing power. And what would happen? What do you suppose would happen if we announced, we're taping this show, just want to make it doable for the mayor. I hope you're watching, Rom, okay. So we're taping this show on March 24th, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in 3 months the school year will end, in 6 months another school year would open. If the legislature were to work together with the powers that be and say we're going to have school vouchers, I know you don't like that word, but we'll come back to that, and we're going to give these people $7,500. Every parent has $7,500 to go to school of choice starting in September.
Yep.
Do you know how many schools that you haven't seen would arise between now and September? Don't you think quite a few?
I don't. I mean,
you know
if you look
how many people would, excuse me, you'd have new principals, you'd have new teachers, you'd have people hiring people from the CP. You know what you would have? You would have competition. Okay.
Competition would be a great thing.
See, like this, I'm using this for a clock, but if you take your smartphone, okay, and you remember what happened before we had smartphones, which was only like 5 years ago. When did they start? 5 years ago. We didn't know what this market would look like. Steve Jobs had an idea of what it would be, you know, but we didn't know what these folks could do. We didn't know what these phones could do. We didn't know anything. And you know what? We got this tremendous influx of competition that came up with this. My point to you is, if you have this purchasing power, you really don't know, and I don't know what it would look like in 4 or 5 years, but it would be quite different than the way as you'd have competition.
I believe in relinquishment and regulation. So I don't think that every school that would pop up would be quality. I think there would be.
But who should choose?
There would be schools that are taking advantage of students. So I do believe in choice. I do believe that we should allow the dollars to follow kids. But I don't think that every provider should be allowed to provide. I think there has to be some type of system
you're not a
to
believer
say
in this guy.
that they are able to perform.
Free to choose, folks.
You know, there are elements of Milton Friedman that I love.
But here's the point. Here's the point, though. It's not that you should be dogmatically for or against Milton. But you're saying somebody else should make the decision other than the parents, not only on what school the parents should choose to send it to, we'll get to that, but who should even be allowed into the marketplace to present their school and say, here is my school, here's what we're going to run it, here are the people who will be there. It sounds like you're saying, no, before you get to do that, what, Myles Mendoza and his friends are going to decide who's qualified?
Oh, no, never.
Who's going to decide then?
Well, I think you have to have the operations of a school be very separate from those that are distributing the funds. That's the problem we have in the current system right now. They're pitcher, umpire, batter, all in one.
But the funds go to the
There has to be a
parent. The
separation.
funds go to the parent, and then the parent chooses. Now, who should intercede between the parent, who's got the funds in my system, and the producer who's trying to exchange his or her services for the funds? Now, if it's not you, Myles, who are we going to put in the position to choose to say who is a qualified school? Because you know what? Nobody got to interview Steve Jobs and say you could do it, or Android could do it, or Samsung can do it. You know why? Because we have a system in America called the free market.
Jeff, are there adults that shouldn't be around children?
Or there adults who shouldn't be? Of course.
Should we allow them to teach?
Well, the producer of that entity, okay? Did you ever go to the Art Institute?
But it sounds
Did
like
you ever go to the Art Institute?
There are definitely there's some exceptions.
Are many places.
There are things we can agree on.
No, because there are many places. There are many places
children.
in which somebody else, other than the government, makes the decision about who should be around children. If you go into the Art Institute, you'll find there are special programs. Kids can go to these special programs, and who makes the decision about the adults who are around children? The Art Institute does. Okay. There are many things. There are park districts. The park district makes the decision. There are so many things. My point is to you, ultimately, the parent makes the decision.
They should make a decision.
Do they want that school? Do they want that park district?
That are allowable. My wife's a doctor, right? I wouldn't want to have anybody just practicing medicine. Right? You want to have some kind of guarantee to make sure malpractice doesn't happen. You want to make sure that doctors, people that are qualified are practicing medicine.
Who will watch the watchdogs?
That's a great question. It's a complicated question.
You know who usually does? Again, if you study economics, it's such a good thing to study, folks, if you're not. It's acquired regulation. I can assure you the teachers' unions will be in there doing this, the bureaucrats will be in this doing this. you will end up with very little competition, very little innovation, and you will end up with protection. It's not that the teachers are bad. When the airlines were regulated, you know who controlled the regulation? The airlines. Do you know our airline rates were much higher 30 years ago because, you see my point?
We have a system right now of accreditation of private schools. There's no reason that that accreditation system couldn't be used to allow schools to operate and receive the public dollar.
The problem
think
with
there's a
that is
point
now
that
because
there
now
are some that are going to be inappropriate,
Okay.
and there will be some schools that will take advantage of students' dollars.
Okay, but let's go on. I don't want to do the whole show on that. But folks, notice this is one difference, I think, between, and this is not me, the people I'm espousing the view on behalf of. There are people who want to free up competition and say, in order to do that, you really have to have free entry into the market. There are well-intentioned people like that, and there are well-intentioned people like you. This is a difference between you and them. You are more willing to allow a process, a governmental process, to decide who will be into the market.
I'm
to
a true
compete.
Democrat who wants to see school choice.
Okay.
That's what
And
makes me
but I'm
different.
just saying, highlighting for the audience, this is a difference, not necessarily one side is right or wrong, but the thing that you both have in common is you both want to see competition.
Correct.
You want to see more competition than we currently have and more choices available to parents.
Correct.
So let's go on. So if you have this system, you're still thinking that you will have somehow, some will say, well, you both haven't addressed. How do you get, if right now you've got 80,000 seats and 200,000 kids want to leave, what do you do with the 120,000? They might ask you that, Myles.
I'm sorry, say that question again. You have
Well, you said
80,000,
you have 80,000 seats, private school seats in Chicago,
but they're not all quality. So in
They're
my
not all
version,
quality. How many do you
I
have that
wouldn't
are
have
quality?
every seat be open.
right? How many do you have that are quality?
You know, I haven't done the actual analysis. My rough guess is that we have 10,000 seats that are available tomorrow,
Quality seats.
quality seats.
And if you have 200,000 students who want to leave, what do you do to remedy that situation between tomorrow and September 1?
So I think a first stage of unleashing the public dollar and allowing students to use that dollar is to start with schools that need it most. The African American community has suffered a lot of school closures. Those students are now having to travel dangerous pathways to get to school, and along their path they're passing private schools. I would allow those students to access their public dollar to go to a safer, closer, better school, which that exists.
And right now they can't because, wait, these are private or public schools that they could go to?
Private schools.
Private schools. And right now those schools have capacity, you're saying?
Correct.
And the kids who are in the public schools walk past them, but they can't take their money and
They
go.
can't take their money.
Okay.
And so they're
So
being
that's
put in
that's what
harm's
you would
way.
do.
If I were an African American in one of those
Right.
communities, I'd be pretty angry. I'd
Right.
be pretty angry that my school was shut down and I wasn't given an option.
Okay.
But that option is there, it's cheaper, it's academically better, and it's safer.
And Ed Choice, your organization, that's Ed Choice, Illinois.
Ed Choice, Illinois.
And how do people learn about this?
They can go to choice4kids.org.
Maybe we can get that up if the graphics folks are right on it. Okay, choiceforkids.org. And they'll find out that you can hopefully continue to watch this show and find out, but on Friday, if you're watching this show on YouTube, it won't air more broadly on cable until after that, but on Friday, March 28th, what's going on?
So we have an event, it's called Club Ed. I invented this in the cold days of winter. I was thinking about Club Med. I took the M off. We have
pretty
Club
cool.
Ed.
Pretty cool.
And we have some great speakers coming in. Darrell Bradford, Kevin Chavis, both African American leaders. Trey Cobb, who we referred to before, 17-year-old, the newest generation of African American leadership, and then students from Village Leadership Academies. It's 4 generations of African American education activists looking at this issue, specifically looking at it in the African American community,
And
where
so-
we think it's most relevant.
And
in
people are
Chicago.
showing this graphic right now. They send an email to community@.
Community@choice4kids.org.
Okay. And so that's Friday morning, the 28th of March, 22 West Washington.
9:30 a.m.
And send your emails to community@choiceforkids.org.
And if you haven't
It's free?
emailed,
It's free?
you can't get in because there's security.
But if you do email, it's free, right?
Correct.
And it's going to, 9:30, you network, meet people, 10 o'clock it starts, you're done by 11 o'clock.
Correct. And there's some question and answer. The idea, this is an event that will continue on bi-monthly, and we rotate through issues.
Okay.
We cover more than choice at Ed Choice Illinois. We
But
cover many different
This
topics.
Friday you'll be covering choice?
And we will rotate through, and it's a community conversation. We want input from the community.
You expect 100, 150, maybe more people?
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly?
Depending, this viewership could bring in a couple hundred, so we might have a waiting list.
And your board, some of your board members might be there?
We will definitely have our board members. We will have some of our funders.
Can you highlight your board members that people would know, like the name John Buck?
John Buck is not a board member.
He's not a board member.
Jack Buck is the
Buck.
vice chairman.
Jack is the son of John Buck?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
So they would know John Buck because he was a big-time realtor and maybe still is in
Correct,
Chicago.
he's a big supporter of us.
Jack Buck has actually done some stuff in education, as I understand.
Jack Buck has been deeply involved. It's a very personal issue for him. It's been for a long time.
And who's the chairman of your board?
John Russell. And John Russell is a man of incredible faith to this issue. He's been supporting this for years, and he will see it through.
And he supported opportunity scholarships.
Opportunity scholarships, correct.
He started that in Inglewood, right?
We have our own scholarship that we've supported students with. In fact, we have a CPS parent.
Your organization. Okay.
Yep, a CPS parent, one of their children is on a scholarship to go to a private school because that parent knows that Village Leadership Academy can provide a better education than can Chicago Public Schools.
And Village Leadership Academy is a charter school?
It's a private school.
It's a private school. And the tuition there usually is how much?
I'm going to roughly guess around 6,000. You're catching me a little off guard.
Well, I didn't mean to, but roughly I think the Opportunity Scholarship, that program that I think John was running and maybe your organization is running now, would basically, as I understood it, commit to pay for the education of a kid from first grade through 8th grade at a school like that.
Correct.
Right.
That's right, yes.
Guarantees that.
Yes.
John goes out and raises the money, and now maybe your organization goes out and raises the money. Is that right?
We do.
That it works?
Yep, we do.
And then could you do that to like give 200,000 students that kind of choice, or do you need, I know you don't like to use the word voucher, but do you need some kind of collectivized program to give those 200,000 choices like Trey has had and benefited and other people who you've
The only way we can
helped.
do this at scale is to have public funding.
Right.
We have, multi-million-dollar capital campaigns coming. If you take all the philanthropy that's given in America, okay, this is Gates, this is Walton, this is Broad, this is everybody you can imagine. You combine all of that together in our education philanthropy, and then you take the budget of what's spent in the nation. We're talking about less than 1% of all expenditures are the philanthropic dollars. Meaning, you may try to make impact in scholarships and programs.
can't.
It will never be done. You have to build dikes and levees to guide the larger amount of money.
We're spending, I think, in the state of Illinois, and you may know this better than I, we've got about 2 million students in public schools. Most of them, again, 90% or 95% of the education of those kids from K through 12 takes place in public schools. 2 million students, I think we're spending about $11,000 per kid per year. That's about, what, $2 million? Something like that. The point is, you need a large chunk of that if you're going to do any kind of a choice program that gives people choice, and then it leads to competition, right? That's the main thing about choice.
One of the biggest tenets of our platform is the idea of accountability. Right now, if you're a failing school, you qualify for more money. That more money has never been seen to make any kind of significant impact. What you need to do is, if you're a higher performing school, you need to be rewarded. You need to expand. And so we have our policies absolutely backwards.
Now, and we got to touch on this because you're a Democrat, right?
Correct.
And you were head in Colorado of an organization called?
I worked for an organization called Democrats for Education Reform.
Okay. And now you're a part of Democrats for Bruce Rauner, right?
I am.
Bruce Rauner, again, if people don't know, he just won the Republican primary. He's the Republican nominee to face in the fall election of November 2014, Pat Quinn. So people are going to get an issue here because Pat Quinn says he favors charter schools, but he doesn't favor school vouchers. Bruce Rauner does favor school vouchers as well as charter schools. Bruce Rauner is making a whole thing of choice a big issue. This could be a defining issue in the race, is that right?
We are very open to Pat Quinn coming around and supporting
You would like to
school
persuade
choice.
him, but if he doesn't come around, your guys, Bruce Rauner, in part, maybe completely because of his views about school choice.
And charters. Charters do
charters.
matter, absolutely.
Well,
we
that's
have
a
not
form of
seen the
choice,
protection
right?
of a state charter authorizer. We heard a question answered by Natasha Korecki in the Sun-Times saying he would not expand charters. So we think there's a clear line.
Pat Quinn said he wouldn't expand
Pat Quinn said he wouldn't
Is he a
expand
captive
charters.
of the teachers union? Is that the problem?
I think,